Okay, welcome to the second episode of the Luke Nielsen Podcast, and I'm joined today by another one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth, my youngest brother, Landan Nielsen. Thanks for being here, man.
You bet. Not a problem. Happy to be here.
Now, when I talked to Logan, we started kind of the same way I'm going to start this one, where we have sort of an interesting background between like three brothers, all born within 5 years, all raised by the same parents, growing up in rural Iowa, and we all went very different career paths. Logan talked a little bit last time about his, going to film school and being a stand-up comedian. I have a fairly traditional profession in terms of being a teacher and a coach, and you eventually became a wildland firefighter.
Correct.
So first, maybe take me on what's the journey to, this is a profession not a lot of people even know about.
Right.
So what brought you to that?
Okay. I guess, we all grew up small towns in Ansgar, Iowa, and I feel like, you always knew what you wanted to go. Logan struggled a little bit, but I think he always knew he wanted to do something in the theater realm, and I never really knew what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to go to college, kind of something I did just because. So it took a pretty different path. I, tried a couple different colleges just because it was the thing to do. It was never for me. I always kind of quit, and then I ended up getting a job at Valero Energy, where our father works. It's an ethanol plant in Charles City, Iowa, and that was kind of my first introduction to, I guess, real life stuff. And I had done, I was always kind of interested in the fire realm. I tried a couple of things, got like a certificate in structure fire, and then I was working with these older men, and they kind of told me, like, you can't do this forever. You can't work at a plant like this. You should check out wildland fire. And again, a kid from Iowa, I didn't even know what that really was. I was aware of forest fires, didn't know people fought them and had jobs in it. So I looked it up. There's a school in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Itasca Community College, and it's one of the premier wildland fire schools and forestry schools in the country, community college-wise. And went to that, got hired by North Dakota Forest Service, and that's been the last 5 years of my life. So,
well, and it's maybe important to note here that before this wildland firefighting adventure, Landan was one of those people that you would have probably pegged to not leave like a 10-mile radius of home.
Right.
I remember when you kind of just decided, like, yep, I'm going up to this Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
Yep.
I'm going to do this. And everybody's kind of like, man, are you sure? Like,
right.
So what I mean, just was it talking to those older guys that you'd worked with, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back? I mean, what was the thing that I finally have to go do this?
Right. I guess, that was helpful. These guys who've experienced some things in life and kind of tell me how big the world is, because I was the guy who never really wanted to leave his hometown. And then, I don't know, I guess I got that itch to want to do something important in my eyes. And, I tried other things. I thought about the military. I thought about something just to make me feel like I was contributing somehow. And then this wildland thing was kind of introduced to me, and it was honestly just like, I'm chase this whimsy. I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna go make this happen. And I did, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life, I would say. It led me down paths and led me to places and done things that I never, if you would have told my 18-year-old self that I would have done all these different things, I wouldn't have known what to think. It's been a wild journey, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And so now I want to kind of get back into then. So you go up to the Itasca Community College.
Yep.
And so I want to spend a little time talking about what it means to be a wildland firefighter. Now, there has been, that profession's gotten a little bit of recognition lately in terms of the movie that came out.
Right.
I think there's even a show on some channel on cable now that follows it.
I'm sure.
So, yeah, but, it's an interesting thing. I'll even tell people, what you do, and then it's a lot of questions. And, and I only know anecdotally from the things that you've told me, but like I've learned so many words that I didn't know existed, and
Right.
all these different things. So starting with while you're at Itasca, what are some of the things that you're studying to go into this?
Okay. It's a really interesting school, and I honestly, like any kid who doesn't really know what they want to do, go spend a year there. You're in a beautiful place, northern Minnesota, and you're learning a cool trade, and it's a cool summer job too, even if you want to do other things with your life. But so you go, we went there, and you're taking classes like forest inventory, and you're literally measuring the board feet in a forest. You go find a random plot, and you measure the trees in it, and you measure their height, and you calculate the board feet, their basal area. And then you're doing a plant taxonomy or dendrology class, and you're learning all about plants. You're the different trees and different native plants and different, bog plants and everything. You're learning the scientific names and all that. Then you're also taking, strictly, so the National Wildland Coordinating Group, they have their own classes that you have to qualify for those classes to be considered a firefighter. You don't need to have forest inventory and all these things, but you need like S130, S190, which is basic wildland fire. You need S211, S212, which is pumps and chainsaws. And so you're also taking these wildland fire classes that will get you hired by a company. And then you're also taking like leadership classes, which is another really cool part of it. We took L180, which is followership to leadership, and L280, which is leadership, advanced leadership. And so it's really cool. And, most people who are out there enjoy the outdoors and enjoy, the leadership setting and working hard. And it's a really, it suited me perfectly.
So then, okay, so you go through your classes, you get all the certifications things you need. Now, there's not just wildland fire jobs anywhere.
Right.
So how do you go about then getting on a crew if this is something you're doing full time?
Right. It's a little different. It's a different process. There's different ways you apply. There's USA Jobs is the federal government, and they have postings every now and again, and you apply to the federal government. I actually worked for the state of North Dakota, and I just was, again, Itasca Community College is just, it was a really great thing for me to go do. And the state Forest Service in North Dakota, they came and did interviews. And I actually wasn't even there on the interview day. I was missing. But my buddy, 2 Chainz, who I'll probably bring up quite a bit in this podcast, he was hired by them, asked if he had anybody else who he knew was a really good worker, and they hired me blind. But it's just, a lot of it is you kind of make friends in the business, and you get through that way as well. You just being a good person and knowing that you're a hard worker. But it is lucky that way. So you have, USA Jobs, and then there's other, DNR jobs and stuff like that post on normal sites. But a lot of it is just kind of knowing some people.
Okay. So, that answers my question.
Yeah, so rambling.
So then you go from Itasca, you get this job working for the state of North Dakota.
Right.
North Dakota Fire Management.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so maybe just give us a little bit, and let's start with when you're on a fire. A little bit, which obviously it's very involved, but like, what are some of the things that you're doing when, what does it look like even like, hey, the call comes in, we have to go to a fire. It's not like being a structural firefighter in a town where it's like, we're going to this block. You're going states, you know? So what does that look like starting out? What are you doing when you get to a fire?
Okay. So, I'll talk about a statewide fire and, maybe a national fire too. So it's a little different. So we had a rule, if we get a call and it's something in state, we have 30-minute response time out of the shop within 30 minutes. So we get the call, everybody's got to get to the shop, we're rolling. And if it's in state, we're probably rolling lights and sirens, and we're getting there as quick as possible. And it's initial attack phase. If it's in state, North Dakota fire. So that's an initial attack fire, and that's wild. Those are the fun fires. You go out of state, you go national fire, you get a call. We have that is 2 hour. We have a 2 hour window because we got to prepare for 14 to 21 days. You're gone that long away from home. So we have a 2 hour window where we get everything we need. We make sure the trucks are good. We always keep really good care of the trucks and make sure everything's in order anyway, so we can boogie whenever need be. But 2 hours to get everything you need, get the food in your pack, get your water in your pack, get everything extra you might need for the trip. And we're heading out the door. And national fires, like my first fire I ever fought was the largest fire in the state of Washington's history. It was over 300,000 acres. It was called the Carlton Complex Fire. And a complex fire is where, there's certain fires in the area and they all kind of converge together. Mm-hmm. It's such a, high fire danger in that area. So it was the complex fire, and it was huge. I mean, thousands of firefighters all camping out right next to each other, and we flew in. The National Guard came in and was feeding us. We were working with convict crews, and working with people from all over the United States and further.
Yeah.
So it's national fires are a really wild experience, but yeah, it's certainly an experience. It's different.
So what is, if you can put into words, what's some of the initial feelings that first time you show up at the Carlton Complex? It's your first real fire. What are some of the things going through your head at that point?
Right. And being a rookie, it's, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You're kind of, it's a lot to take in, and you're driving in, and you're still, miles and miles and miles away, and you can see the plume of smoke. You know what I mean? You see the big column of smoke. And you're like, holy cow, like I'm going to go be at that soon here. and then you show up. And I remember my first day too, like, you get sent to a certain assignment, so you get sent to your division. It's very militaristic. It's the best way to operate as a fire crew. So we show up, we talk to operations and supply and all the things that we need. We need to, sync up our mics so we're talking to the right people and all that sort of stuff. And then you get sent to your division. You talk to your division soup. He tells you where he wants you, what sections he wants to protect. So you're there, you're protecting a couple houses maybe, you're doing some checks, and then all of a sudden, I remember my first day, fire started ripping up this hill, and all of a sudden, like, we're running lights and sirens, and we're running a hose, and we're lighting a back burn towards this section. It wasn't going to get anything crazy, but we just want to control the flame. Like, we're not going to stop this thing, but try to control it as best you can. And I remember, your first day, and it's, wow, like this is for real. So yeah, it's a wild first thing to get into, but then it becomes part of the job like anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and just, maybe some details for people who don't know the job as well. So you were part of an engine crew.
Right.
So you guys are running engines. Not all wildland crews are.
Right.
So you have trucks.
Right.
And then I think, I remember even when you got into it and sort of the picture that people have of firefighters in general fighting fires, like we're laying hose and we're spraying water.
Right.
Kind of rarely the case in wildland fire, isn't it?
Yeah. Depending on the fire. So generally you can get water there if there's a source, if you have a lake or something like that. If there's no water source there, it's all hand work. It's hand crews. So like my crew, we ran a strike team of engines, but we also had the capability of running a Type 2 IA hand crew. We're a Type 2 initial attack. So people have heard about smoke jumpers and hot shots and stuff like that. It's all basically the same job, but hot shots have higher qualifications. They get sent to kind of the cooler parts of the gnarlier parts of the fire. So Type 2 IA crew, so you're going in there, you have maybe 2 lead sawyers cutting stuff. Then you have swampers. Those are guys who are coming in behind them, throwing, your lane. And then you have like 14 guys coming behind them, swinging a tool, digging a hand line to, potentially stop this fire in the middle of the forest or, up on a hill somewhere that's good where it's not going to rush back down at us. Mm-hmm. So so a lot of it is hand crew work. And we always talk about that too, like all the technology in the world, all these things. And sometimes the best thing is boots on the ground doing hard work. It's a wild thing, but it's the way it is.
Absolutely. So, the vast majority of your job, you're trying to eliminate fuel source for the fire.
Right.
In order to contain things, protect property, those sorts of things.
Right. That's generally the best technique. Like people just assume if you don't have water, what do? You're like, we rarely are actually spraying water on a fire to put it out.
Absolutely.
We'll put in a line, either a dozer line or a hand line, or we'll come off a road or something like that. and we might lay a little hose line, and then the goal is to burn a fire back towards the head fire. That is always probably the safest way to do it, and it cuts out all that fuel for us that we don't have to worry about then. Less for us to get in there and have a tree fall on us or something like that. So
absolutely. And then, so tell me a little bit about the duration of days that you might be on these fires, because there's a couple different ways they can block out the time. Is that right?
Right. So you get sent to a national fire. You're signed up for 14 days minimum, generally, unless you get a serious weather event that puts it out, or something, monsoon rains down in the southwest or something like that. So you're signed up for 14 pretty much no matter what. Sometimes they'll re-up you, and they can re-up you for another 7 straight, so 21 straight days, or they can re-up you and give you 2 R&R days and then another 14 for a total of 30.
Sure.
So you're away from it, and you're not going to go home for those 2 R&R days. You're going to go bunk up in the nearest city and then sign up for the next roll of 14.
Sure.
So,
okay, so while fires are rolling, you're digging, you're cutting trees, you're burning fires, you're perhaps spraying water, depending on the fire, but it's manual labor.
Oh yeah, big time.
How many hours a day are you doing this?
Generally like 12 guaranteed, up to 16. Most days you're kind of banking on 16, and then if you're out there on initial attack phase, like North Dakota fires, if we're showing up, it's initial attack phase, and your 2-to-1 ratio of, you can work 16 hours and you have to take 8 off, does not apply anymore.
Gotcha.
If you're showing up, like we fought a fire in Bismarck, and I was probably on it for 48 straight hours. Then we went and bunked up in our lockers for 3 hours, woke back up and went and fought it for another 8 or so, and then we called it out. But
sure.
So with national fire, you're generally working at least 14 days of 16-hour days, I would say.
Okay. And then now when at the point where you do get to bunk down a bit for the day, it's not like you're going to the Ritz-Carlton. What's right. What's that look like at the end of the day, where it's like, hey, we're stopping for a few hours until we fight all day tomorrow?
Right. It's that's kind of one of the fun parts of the job too, is you get to sleep in really cool places that you never imagined people would sleep in. So if you're at a big incident, you get back to camp, you shovel some food in your face as quick as you can, get some calories, and then most of us, a lot of people put up their tents. Like our crew, we made it so you had to tear down everything, so we're IA ready always. So we're never leaving anything, putting everything back in our truck in the morning when we wake up. So all of us, nobody puts up a tent. We would just lay down a bivy sack and a sleep bag. I would sleep for my pillow. I just put a sweatshirt in one of my squish bags, one of my Sea to Summit bags, and that's how I rolled. I didn't even have a sleeping pad until my 3rd year. It's kind of funny, how you you just get better stuff, and you get better at it over the years, including how you sleep. Yeah. My first year was just a sleeping bag, a bivy, and a hoodie there, and then you get better. Then I got a sleeping pad, which is wonderful, and then I got a sleeping liner that actually feels like a blanket. You're not sleeping with plastic, and it's just kind of funny. You get better at it, but it's literally just 20 guys, or thousands if you look across, that are just have a tarp over their head. We're all just crashed. You're so beat from the day anyway. You can sleep anywhere.
Yeah. And I will say I've seen this bivy sack, if you're not aware of what that is. Landan and I recently went camping up in Voyageurs National Park, which is lovely, the Minnesota-Canada border. And it was for real camping, yeah. It was the smallest little taste for me, where we slept. I had a little bivy tent, and you had your bivy sack, which is just a sleeping bag with a flap. That's essentially all it is.
Pretty much.
And camping out in the for real wilderness, where their only advice was don't drink the water and put your food in a bear box. So right. That was great. But it was sort of this oh man, you're doing this for a month at a time while the forest is on fire.
Right. It's a wild thing, and it's fun because like nobody really understands the work that goes into it and sleeping that way. But it's such a unique experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Absolutely. And I'm going to circle back a little bit to, you know, some of the things that you're taking away from those experiences. But tell us a little bit first about, obviously you're not always on a fire call.
Right.
What are you doing when you're basically in waiting?
Right. So a lot of crews are different. National crews especially, they'll have a national forest that they patrol or something like that. They don't really thin as much as our crew did. So our crew, we were stationed in Bismarck, North Dakota, but we were contracted by, they had a really bad fire that passed through western North Dakota, which if you haven't been to western North Dakota, you should go. It's beautiful. But
I can contest.
Right. So they had this really bad fire go through, and it was so hot and so nasty because nobody had ever thinned this forest that, and it used to be a national forest actually in the early 1900s. And then they took the national forest status away from it, and now it's privately owned. But they had this fire move through anyway, and the trees actually never regenerated. It was such a hot, bad fire. So now they hired North Dakota State Forest Service, and we go in there and we thin the forest, cut down hazard trees, cut down trees that have bad genetics, and then we actually take like the pine cones, collect pine cones from like good, healthy, straight trees, cut down a couple of good, healthy, straight trees, and we take those pine cones and we plant those. So we bring them back to our foresters and they do their thing, and then we take the saplings the next year and we plant. I've planted, tens of thousands of ponderosa pine trees. So that's what we do as part of our job out there, and the rest is thinning the forest. And we lived in these a man camp essentially. They're all these trailers that actually like we got from FEMA that came from Hurricane Katrina. So they're real quality.
We all know how well things went with Hurricane Katrina. Then
Right.
you got the leftovers after.
Right. So that's a unique experience on its own. That's why I loved my crew so much. It's, even when we weren't on a fire, when we were supposed to be home in North Dakota, we weren't ever actually home. We were in western North Dakota, and we were on this rancher's land named Shaky Jacobson. And he was the coolest. He'd have a cigarette in one hand and a warm Ham's beer in his other hand, and he'd come and curse at us and make us do stuff around his ranch. Like, we branded his cattle. I don't know, tons of things. Put up posts for him, put in fence, help him get his cattle, like ranging his cattle, and such a weird thing. And you have no cell phone service. You have no internet. Yeah, you have electricity just from his cabin. His cabin, the water comes out brown and oily. So you bring in your own water, you bring in your own food to live for a week, and you work hard cutting down trees, hiking all day. And you go back though, and it's some of the most rewarding work ever. That hard work, and you're with all your buddies, and you get done cutting all day, and you go and you'll grill out on some steaks, and I loved it. Loved the experience.
So talk to me a little bit about that, just the camaraderie in general, with being on a fire and being around guys where, it's your job, but you are living with these guys pretty much 24/7. Especially when you're on a fire, and even for your crew, at least during the work week, you're living with each other as well.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like our experience, I feel like, is more unique than a lot of like how national forests do it now. They bring in different people sometimes, where our crew, you get hired and that's your crew for at least that year. And we would all be together all week cutting down trees in western North Dakota, for weeks at a time if we're going to national fire. But even then, like, we're all guys from all different states. There's 2 guys from North Dakota. The rest of us are all from different states all over the country. And we all moved to Bismarck, North Dakota, and we don't know anybody in North Dakota either. So it's kind of funny. Even on our off time, our weekends or whatever, where we do get to go back to Bismarck, we're all together, because like, who else are you going to hang out with? So it is kind of wild. Like, you're with these people for 6 to 8 months straight, and they become this. It is like some of the guys like, oh, we're not a family, and they get kind of core, but like, it is kind of this family, like, brotherhood sort of thing, where everybody has each other's back, even if they don't want to admit it. Like, it's kind of like some of the guys will go out for drinking, and there's 20 dudes out drinking, and we had this one guy who was kind of whatever. You go and like hit on a girl, and it's like, oh, what's this guy gonna do? There's 20 of us. Like, we all roll together everywhere we go.
Yeah.
So it's a super tight knit community. It really neat. Even though the whole fire world. I mean, you call any firefighter who you worked for 2 weeks in Idaho, and he was an engine boss, and you talked to him for a while. He's got my back forever. I know he does. It's a really, really cool, unique group like that.
And that's, we've had the conversation before. I suppose my closest experience of something like that is playing college football.
Right.
Which as you get older too, I suppose like the military has to be sort of the highest extreme about that.
Right.
And that's something that people talk about is when they leave the military, missing that camaraderie, that family feel, that brotherhood, those sorts of things.
Right.
So I've never felt anything that extreme, or in your situation where you are in life and death type situations. Mm. But what do you think is sort of the important thing about that, or the important thing that generates when you are with these people, and not only with these people all the time, but you are doing something difficult?
Right. I think doing difficult things is one of the most important things in life. I don't think enough people do difficult things anymore that really gain a bond, I guess. Some of my favorite moments in life have been me and the guys fighting a fire. I remember one time we were in Oregon, and we're putting in a hand line. This fire started by a lightning strike, and we're digging a hand line around it. It's already like 10 p.m. or something like that. We're starting to fight the fire, and literally all the Oregon resources pulled off this fire, and we didn't know it. So we just keep fighting the fire. We have a thunderstorm going on up above us. It starts to kind of rain on us. We see thunder and lightning in the back. We're like, well, we're going to get around this fire. Like we're going to get this done. Mm-hmm. Get a line around it at least. And I remember like hiking out at 3 a.m. or whatever. It's pitch black. We all the only light you can see is the headlamps coming off of our hard hats. And we're all walking and laughing and having like one of my favorite moments ever. And it's, nobody else would love that moment. Most people you don't think would appreciate that. I think people need to do difficult things like that so they can have this cool appreciation for it and gain this camaraderie. Like I've read this thing I was talking about companionative love, and it's about doing something difficult with people. Like you have all these feelings, you went through something with these people.
Yeah,
you will have this love and respect for them forever because of that thing.
Yeah.
And some of it's growing up with people or college football or whatever the case may be. And like ours was just such a unique, wild experience. And I have a love for those guys forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you and I have talked about that. I mean, like I feel the same way about my friends from, football and college, mm-hmm. where we wound up living together, a bunch of us, and then it is, we called each other family, and, mom had our, group of my friends,
right.
Our team from college, hanging up on the family picture wall and those
right.
sorts of things, and still consider those guys family. And a lot of similarities, too, in sort of if you're around each other all the time,
right.
you have to entertain yourselves a little bit.
Yes.
You have arguments or disagreements that you have to hash out. So talk to me about some of those things about, how do you, it's hard sometimes in a normal work environment to sort of get along with everyone and,
right.
and handle those things. How do you do that when you're stuck with these people? There's no two ways around it.
Right. That's one of the coolest parts of it too, I think, is just you have to move on from some things. And talking about that too, about entertaining each other. I'm sure like that movie, the big wildland movie about Yarnell Hill, I'm sure it was great. I didn't even see it. I figured it'd be too intense for me because like my favorite moments are 20 guys out in the woods trying to make each other laugh, because that's the majority of the job. You're bored in the woods and you're trying to make each other laugh. But of course you're on a fire for 21 days. You're going to butt heads. It's a bunch of young guys who can be hotheads and stuff at times. And I've had yelling matches where we're almost coming to blows and then give each other space, and then we come back in the woods like 30 minutes later, because that's all you got. You got to roll it, and like you shake their hand, you're like, all right, we're like, we have to be good, so we're good, and you squash it. That's something that actually it's kind of changed my way I think about, like other people who like, if I lose my temper at somebody and like they're affected by it so much, it's like I guess I've kind of lost that where I don't get that being affected by it for that long. Like, all right, like we had our little tiff and move on. Like it has to be over with. So that is something that, you gain. And I've had it out with some of my best friends in the world out in the woods for 21 days straight, and you're going to butt heads, but you get over it, and we're brothers again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it kind of harkens back to that family sense where, I mean, if you are in a family, it's sort of an unconditional love sort of thing, not to get too sappy with it or whatever, but it's sort of like, hey, we're in this no matter what, so like we can have this disagreement, but you got to move on because we're still here, and I still got you, and whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. The reality situation is there's this huge fire here, and like we got to handle it. So
the fire cares not about our disagreements.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, talk to me about nicknames, because that was something I experienced in college football too, where like there are guys to this day who I played with, and I couldn't tell you their given name, but I will remember their nickname forever. And even some of my, dearest, closest friends, when someone will say their actual name, I'm like, what now? I know them by their nickname.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why that is such a thing for a group of guys to get around each other. And I've never had a nickname that sticks ever, but it just happens. And we had a couple good nicknames on the crew. So like one of my buddies, 2 Chainz, I talk about him all the time, and he's my best friend. And so I met him in college, and his name's Christian Shuck, and I always just called him Chuck. I just took the S off his last name. He was just Chuck forever. And then we went to the crew, and he always wears like 2 chains around his neck, 2 like necklaces. So he got the nickname 2 Chainz. And I call him 2 Chainz always now, or Chuck. His real name is Christian. And I remember like our engine bosses and stuff, I'd always call him Chuck or 2 Chainz. And they didn't when they had to write his name, they're like, who the hell is Christian? I don't know who the hell that is. Like, Chuck is Christian. 2 Chainz is Christian.
Yeah.
So the names just stick. We had my other buddy, Robert Horn. I wouldn't even know that name at all. His name is Hippie. He's Hippie forever. He's a dude from Colorado, big beard, nose ring, peace sign on his leg, tattooed on his leg. He's Hippie.
Yeah.
And so those nicknames and everybody's kind of assigned a nickname when you're a rookie. You get a nickname because we're not going to learn your damn name right away.
Yeah.
And then you kind of earn your name. So everybody gets a nickname right away, and then some stick and some go away, clearly.
Yeah.
But
so now talk to me a little bit about that. Like you're talking about, the rookies sort of have to earn their names. You've got the guy in your crew who's called Pop-Tarts.
Yep.
Or Pop-Tart.
Yep.
And talk to me a little bit about that. It's kind of a fine line. I remember you talking about when you came into the crew, and the way they treated the rookies was maybe to a point that was off-putting, that
too much,
that hurt the team chemistry.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that's something we lose some in this day and age, is this idea of earning your stripes a little bit.
Right.
And of course there is a breaking point where it becomes detrimental. But talk to me a little bit about that.
Right. So when I came in as a rookie, we were all kind of affected by it. We didn't think it was a good way to do that. And they basically just didn't talk to us. They didn't talk to the rookies, and they just treated us like we were nothing. And that is a terrible way. That's like, I told them that now that I'm friends with all these people, I'm like that is, have you guys ever played a sport or anything like that? Is a terrible way to build a team. So yeah. I wanted to really change that when I kind of got, more seniority, and we'd make it fun. And, it's not like everybody gets a nickname, and they're all silly nicknames, and they're all kind of not demeaning, but not hurtful, but they're just silly. And we make the rookies wear pink helmets, and it's not like a feminist silly thing. It's just, you're going to wear a pink helmet because you'll stand out in the woods, and you don't get your hard hat yet that has our logo on the side.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to earn your stripes. So we had this one kid, it was his first day, and we had this big Bismarck fire, and we literally just shook his hand, and we didn't know his name. His name is Zach. He's a great guy, but I remember we met him. Yeah, you meet a lot of guys, and then we go to this fire, and our crew boss comes up to us like, yeah, that Derek guy or whatever. So he was just Derek for a while, and then that slowly turned into just other names. Like he was just Derek, and then it just turned into girl names. And Rachel stuck for a long time, and now he's Zach. He earned his name back. But
yeah.
It's just, I don't know, just a fun thing in the fire world that not meant to be hurtful, but
Yeah.
if you do something silly, you're getting a nickname that sucks. Like my buddy Pop Tarts, who we go out to our site in North Dakota where we cut trees, and we live there for a week, and we tell him you got to get enough food and water to, live for a week, especially doing hard labor. And all he bought was 2 boxes of Pop Tarts. So I'm sorry, you're Pop Tarts now.
Yeah. That reminds me of Jordan Peterson, I know, has talked about that in different podcasts. And it is, I tell even like the young people that I coach and stuff, is there's some things that we do just because they're difficult, and it's not to weed anyone out, it's not to hurt anyone, it's not to whatever, but there's just not that many rites of passage anymore.
Right.
And there's something about overcoming that and understanding that when you're starting out, I'm not going to be the best at this. I'm going to make mistakes, especially if you're in a situation that's it is life or death. It's dangerous.
Right.
Like you need to have a way to curb mistakes quickly.
Right.
And then you come out the other side of it and you're a little tougher and a little wiser and all those sorts of things.
Right. And we, another rule for rookies is you don't get to touch a chainsaw for generally the first year. Essentially that whole first summer you're swamping or you're digging line. You're not cutting, and you're learning how to kind of get around the sawyer. You're learning how to swamp for him. You're learning how to watch how he cuts. And guys who are good will put a chainsaw in your hand after a while and give you some practice reps, but you got to kind of earn that too. Having a chainsaw in your hand and being the lead sawyer on a wildland fire crew is a big deal, and we all take a lot of pride in being quality sawyers. So again, you earn your hard hat, you earn your senior firefighter status, you earn your chance to test out for your bee faller or something like that to really become a good sawyer and become a quality firefighter. But at first, your first thing you're told on a fire crew you get there is not to curse a bunch, but to shut the fuck up and do as you're told. Like that's essentially what you're told as a rookie. You shut up and you do what you're told. If something's dangerous, speak up, but otherwise we don't need to hear what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, especially in that line of work, for the other guys too, it's important to get a sense of how reliable this person is going to be. Yep.
And that's so, at first we have a couple of training weeks and we're feeling each other out, and we're doing, some testing, some physical testing. We're talking about fire, the previous fire season, the fire season that we think is going to maybe be coming up, some different safety things. And then, our first big training thing is we go into the woods and, Western North Dakota, and we start cutting, and, you got to prove something to us here. Like, this is your first week really doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
Step up, show us what you're going to be like.
Yeah.
And then, you kind of earn, if this guy's a worker, we can tell if he's a worker, we tell if he's going to really put an effort out there, and then you kind of gain your stripes that way, and you move up, and people want to work with you. People want you as your swamper, and yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
Sure. Absolutely. So now talk to me a little bit. You, over the years you were doing this, well, first, I mean, a point of clarification, because you said sawyer a few times. You kind of explained what swamper is the guy clearing stuff behind.
Right.
Sawyer, if you're not familiar, that's the person running the chainsaw.
Correct. Cutting down this stuff.
Yeah. And there are different, in a lot of the things you're doing, there are different certification levels and things like that. So you start as an A faller.
You start as nothing.
Okay.
Then you get a class S212, and that gives you the chance, I can run a chainsaw. I took this class. I am capable of running a chainsaw. Then you take a test and you get your A faller. Mm-hmm. And that means you can cut down small trees and you can cut down trees that are on the ground or whatever. And our crew was different. We were a really good saw team, and our A fallers, I'd say, are pretty quality all the time. And then you show you're a competent A faller, you get the chance to test out for your B. and our crew was mostly all bee fallers, which is a big deal in the fire world. Like, so sea fallers are like incredible. They do incredible things. And we had a couple guys who were capable of being sea fallers, but the majority of us were bee fallers, and that's taking down some pretty serious trees, taking down some trees with, some different bends in them and trying to twist them and trying to get them off stumps in certain ways. And yeah, I mean, you get a lot of hours running a chainsaw, and you can do some pretty interesting things with some trees. So
yeah. Talk to me, I guess, while we're talking about that, about sort of, what you get away from basically becoming an expert in something, because when you left home and went to do this, it's not like you had a lot of time on a chainsaw or anything.
Like none. And
then we've talked about, and we'll get back to this, but right now you're working for a landscaping company doing some different stuff.
Right.
Just because we'll kind of talk about it's hard to have a real long career in wildland fire.
Correct.
At least in the way that you guys were doing it.
Right.
But we had the conversation of like back in our area, especially in north central Iowa, for instance, there's not a lot of trees. There's no forest. It's like you might be the best person with a chainsaw within 100 miles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So tell me a little bit about just that and sort of the satisfaction of and working to something where like you really have to be an expert at it in that line of work.
Right. It's like my favorite thing to do ever. And it's weird. Like, it's something I was nervous to do when I first picked one up, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then it's hard to explain now because, it's just become a part of me. I can just see, I can drop a tree and I can just see it perfectly. I know when to do a top cut or a bottom cut. I see the flexion or the tension, and it just, like, I was cutting this one kid on my current like little landscaping company. He's just like, you look like an athlete when you're cutting, man. And, like, it becomes a part of you. And so yeah, like, getting like 10,000 hours running something, you become an expert. And I literally consider myself an expert in doing these sort of things. And I'm kind of rambling, but
no, I think that sort of hits what I was driving at, I guess, is it's sort of, I think a lot of times people are averse to jumping into a new skill because you're not going to be very good when you start.
Right. I guess that's kind of had a thought before that, you see some people like, I know how to cut. I'm like, well, who taught you? Like my grandpa cut down. Like, you don't know anything. I'm glad I'm glad you know how to start a chainsaw, but you know nothing. Like, I've been taught tricks by the fire managing officer of the state of South Dakota. And I've cut down trees in Alaska with a sea faller who was an ex-hotshot and smoke jumper in Alaska. And like, you don't know anything. And like, so it's kind of like it's hard to explain now because you get so good with it. I guess that's kind of what I was going at before. You get so good with something, and it's kind of hard to teach somebody who's just starting out. You just see it way before they ever see it. And it's tough. Like, I'm cutting with this one guy I kind of been working with, and like some of the cuts he makes, just like I would just do that different. Like, it works how he does it, but I would do it different just because I have different training. It's a different thing. But I love having that skill now. And it is one of my favorite things to do. I think it's a little like artistic to me too. Like, most people wouldn't think that a chainsaw revving all the time, but I don't know. There's something like using my hands and kind of thinking that fast and knowing what you're going to do and knowing what you're going to do next, knowing what tree you're going to cut, how you're going to cut it. You're going to buck that up, what tree you're going to go to next, where you're going to put your pile when you're going to stack your logs and burn them later. It's all just this puzzle that's all going to be coming together. And I don't know if I could do a job that doesn't have that in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you hit on a lot of the points I was kind of aiming at, where it's, I try to convey to the students that I teach and things like that is that, one, the importance of starting to do something that you're not an expert at and going through taking the lumps and the learning and whatever, and then sort of the pride and that you get out of, now I've mastered this to a certain level, and it goes from that stage where you're having to really think about what you're doing, to where, like you said, like it becomes a part of you. It becomes automatic, and then that psychological phenomenon of being in the zone. Everything else kind of goes away. And I always think about that with athletics. I remember I mean, like making the jump from high school football to college football, and at first it seemed like everything was being played in fast forward. Like all of this is happening too fast. I don't know what's going on, and then eventually it starts to slow down.
Right.
And then you go and you watch like a high school football game and go, it could not have been this slow when I played. This is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Or, I always think of, I've done martial arts since I was 5 years old, but it's an interesting thing too to be like, you see somebody who's maybe taken a cardio kickboxing class and just watching them throw a punch looks wrong or, whatever.
Right.
You pick up those little details, but it's also humbling to know, like you talked about, like you can train with somebody who, oh no, this person's the super expert.
Right.
Like I've done martial arts, since I was 5, but like, I'm not a UFC fighter. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
There's a level beyond, that's an interesting and neat thing too, that like there are people who in this niche little thing are experts.
Right. Yeah. It's one of the coolest things too, because at first it's overwhelming and trying to figure it all out. And it's kind of funny. You put a chainsaw in somebody's hand to begin with, and you look stiff. You know what I mean? Like I like, the chainsaw's just on my hip, and it pivots from my hip. I don't ever stick it out. And you can just tell. Like I can just see somebody with a chainsaw. I can tell who's good. But then you do get humbled by some people, and it's like you think you know a lot, and then you go cut with somebody. You're like, oh yeah, wow, no, he's on a different level than I am, and it is really cool. And so I've worked with some of those guys, and I've like my buddy 2 Chainz again. Like me and him started the same time. We're both very quality sawyers, but he is by far a better sawyer than I am.
Yeah.
And we're both beef haulers and both talent, but like he can do some things with trees that I would be scared to do. So it's wild how some guys just have a knack for it. 2 Chainz can't spell good, and he's meant to have a chainsaw in his hand. I swear, he's just good at it.
Well, that's an important thing too, and I feel like was an important part of your journey to getting to be a wildland firefighter is like, if you're willing to try things, like there's something out there where you're an expert. Like I tell my students that too, is like there's something where you're the expert and I'm the novice.
Right.
I don't know what's going on, so take pride in that, and then also on the other end, like be willing to jump into things where you're not going to be the expert, because it's going to be okay, and then you'll be able to get better at it.
Yep. And that's like, even for me, like coming from wildland fire, like I became a very respected firefighter and an EMT and a faller too, and all these things. And I felt really good. My ego kind of puffs up, and then even I just go to this landscape company or whatever, and I don't really know how to back a trailer at the time, or or drive a skid steer, and now all of a sudden that is so natural to me. Like I can back a trailer into tiniest little spaces, but like it kind of hurts your ego to be like, man, I've done so many crazy things, and I don't know how to do this one thing. Like I've never done it. I can't expect to just be it hurts your ego at times, but sometimes you just gotta suck at something and get better, and you feel awesome because of that.
The payoff is worth the initial uncomfortable feeling and like anxiety and whatever. Yeah, absolutely. So with that too, we've hit on a little bit as you sort of progress through, getting different certifications. And correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there's sort of a ranking system of sorts.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
So as you kind of climbed up, because I forget, you were able to sort of like test out, where then you could basically be the lead on a fire.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how do you work up to the leadership ranks?
Right. So at first you're a rookie, and you're just considered a crew member, and you're not going to get any assignments really other than swamping and digging holes. Mm-hmm. And then, you progress, and so then you try to sign off. So you're considered a firefighter 2 when you're a rookie. And then you try to sign off. You get your firefighter 1 signed off. And that considers you a squad boss certification. So I can have 6 people under me, and we can run as a squad, and I can dig handline and direct them, essentially. Yep. And then there's incident commanders. So like my first time being an incident commander, IC5, you're a trainee. And I was an incident commander on top of Pioneer Peak in Alaska with no North Dakota units. It was me, 2 guys from Alaska, the crew I was working with, and then a bunch of volunteers from some neighboring community in Alaska.
Sure.
And you're talking to helitack, like helicopters up above you who are scouting out the fire. You're talking to dispatch. Got to make sure your guys are fed and like okay and have everything they need. And you're trying to put out a fire, and it is wildly overwhelming the first couple of times you do it.
Oh, I bet.
It's so much to take in, and you're like, I remember the first time I did it, like I kind of just like told them what I did, and like I just started working. Like if I just start working, I'll be okay. And I just start digging a hole because that's what I know I'm doing. I know how to dig a hole.
Yeah.
So it's a wild thing, and becoming an instant commander. And I mean, there's some guys who do some incredible stuff, but then you get your squad boss, and then if you're good at that, you might get your single resource boss. Like you might become an engine boss or a dozer operator, or dozer boss, or a helicopter boss. Like there's just so many things in the fire with the fire investigator. There's so many things you can go and kind of do. Mm-hmm. And I went and got my EMT, my National Registry EMT certification, and I was the lead EMT of our crew, as well as one of the lead sawyers. I was one of our lead fallers, and I was a firefighter 1 and IC5, so I had squad boss status, and you just kind of move through the ranks that way, and it's awesome. It's a great way to live for a while, but it's not much of a home life, so it does take a toll. But yeah.
So now talk to me about. So you spend a lot of time in these high pressure situations, mm-hmm. In a leadership role a lot of times, those sorts of things. Is it ever difficult going from that and then going back to regular life? Like, does it feel like things are in slow motion?
It sucks. Sometimes regular life is great, but it was tough. Like, so when I quit the crew, it just got to the point where I'm not really going anywhere in North Dakota. I'm going to go do something different. And you go and it's just frustrating. Like, we're there. We're all wearing the same stuff. We're tucked in. We're looking, it's a uniform. Like we are looking uniform. We're walking in a straight line. We're walking single file. Whenever we walk, we say moving. Whenever we have to stop, holding. Everything is passed down the line and passed back up. Everything is crisp. And then you go and you work some other job, and it's just thrown together and it's jumbled. And we have weeks talking about safety and weeks how to do certain things. We have training scenarios just on random days, like, hey, we're gonna have a medical scenario right now, so we're gonna be on point if some medical ever does happen. And it's frustrating to me that isn't in the real world. Like, no, nothing is that crisp and that that on point. Like, what you're going to do every time you get to work. What everybody's going to be looking like, and everybody's going to be doing their job. And like, that's what I mean too, like getting comfortable with a sawyer and a swamper. Like, you get to the point you guys can work circles around each other. I don't have to think where my swamper is going to be at. I know where he's going to be. Yeah. Because we've done this so many times, and it hurts my head, the chaos of like, I just need to go to the woods and cut down trees, because that is, it's all I can handle.
So what do you think, if you were to get to the root of it, what do you think is the significance of that discipline?
What do you mean?
Well, maybe I didn't ask everyone. It just, like, for me, it feels like once you've experienced that level of discipline in something, right. It seems difficult, maybe even off-putting when you start.
Right.
Because to develop that level of discipline in anything, it almost seems like at first you're doing things that are unnecessary.
Right.
But I think over time you start to realize that discipline carries over to other things, and you can start to see why it's effective.
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess that it's like, you start out in fire and you're like, we're really going to walk fucking single file, and we're going to say, like, it's just constant communication, and it gets silly, and you think it's silly, and then it just kind of becomes a party, and like I don't know, like you kind of carry yourself a little different because you do all this stuff with all these guys, and then like I honestly think like the job I have now is not more dangerous than like a life or death sort of way, but it's more dangerous and it's chaos. Like it's not organized, where being disciplined and knowing exactly how my chainsaw works, knowing I can tear it apart, I can build a chainsaw from parts at this point. Like I know how my tool works. I know how to sharpen my tool correctly. I know just knowing your guys, being a tight knit group, knowing where everybody's going to be and how everything works and how your pumps work. And being disciplined is one of the biggest, I guess, things that I took from that. And it's really stressful to not be in a very organized environment like that.
Sure.
I need to, that's what I mean. Like, I want to get back to something like that, because regular life just doesn't do it for me anymore. It's,
yeah.
I like the structure. I really do.
Sure. And then with that, I mean, sort of talking about the discipline, one thing that I've just blatantly stole from you that I use in class and things is situational awareness.
You bet.
The phrase, keep your SA up.
Got to.
Love that. So I use it all the time. Talk to me a little bit about that. What is situational awareness?
Right. And okay, that's a good thing in the world. Nobody has situational awareness. Fucking nobody. And everybody on fire has their SA up. And that's just something that's just a reminder we'd say to each other every now and again. You're getting in, like, the fire's kind of popping, it's kind of ripping, whatever. You're kind of going to a heads up situation. Keep your SA up. Mm-hmm. Everybody keep your situational awareness up. Like, you know, let's look up, down, like around, let's be safe here. And it's that's what I mean. Like, it's such a safety is just pounded into your head, and things go wrong all the time. Like, they've got stories. I got guys who've almost been hurt or killed. I've almost lost a finger or two, and things get hairy, but you just kind of know how you're going to handle it even then too. Like, your situational awareness is always there, where just being out in the world, just look at people for 10 seconds. There's no situational awareness. They're just mindlessly walking around on their freaking thing with all the information in the world on it, and they're looking at pictures of dogs or whatever. And it's just, it drives me insane. Like, keep your SA up.
So if we sort of define situational awareness, I mean, it's just sort of the being cognizant of everything around you, of what, you know, especially in your line of work, you know, what might go wrong, and sort of understanding what your escape routes, your plan of action, those sorts of things. Right. Sort of having that stewing all the time.
Right. And that's another, you said escape routes. That's the thing that if we don't have LCES, that's lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones. If we don't have one of those four things, we are not doing this. So just that alone, like, you show up somewhere and it is jumbled and it is chaos, and some, like, initial attack is chaos, and sometimes you do just got to go. But for the most part, if we show up something and it's not going to, whatever, we're not going to get a house burnt down or something like that. If it's just grass or whatever, like, no, we're going to get a lookout. We're going to get synced up our mics. Mm-hmm. We're going to find some escape routes on what we're going to do, and we're going to have some safety zones laid out. Like, you have to have those things. And that's just part of the situational awareness, I guess. Like, everybody's got to know. When there's, I always say this because there's this one firefighter. He was the AFMO of a Standing Rock Native tribe, and he would always say, if things go, he has this funny voice, if things go gunny sack, you know, he's call it going gunny sack, and I can't help it. That's why when things get hairy, I call it gunny sack now. So if things do go gunny sack, you got to know where you're going to go. You got to know where your crew's going to meet you. You know, like, hopefully we're never ever going to lose each other anyway, but you got to know these things. You got to have your SA up and know where all your guys are going to be.
Yeah. So that's another thing I think of is, you know, I'm a big proponent of the situational awareness. I preach that to my students, to my own kids. Right. And I always feel like, too, I don't know if it stems from martial arts or things like that, but you and I have talked about, you know, like, anytime I'm in a new situation, too, you're sort of sizing people up, not in a negative way, you know, but just like looking people over. And, you know, I talk to my kids about self-defense, or my students and things like that, and talk about the best way to avoid an emergency or something like that is to have a high level of situational awareness. Right. You know, keep your eyes. One day, my kids, Mickey and Claire, and I were at the grocery store, and there was someone who was in the grocery store acting very erratic. Right. And I had spotted this person and was keeping an eye on him. And then both of my kids, this was a couple of years ago, so they're, you know, 4 or 5 years old, and they're like, Dad, that guy's acting funny. And I'm like, yes, he is. Correct. You know, so we're keeping an eye on those sorts of things. And then through my head, it's like, you know, what if this person does something? What am I going to do to defend myself and my kids? What are our ways out of here? Those sorts of things. Right. Which I think is always important, but does that sort of situational awareness too make it difficult to, again, come back into the real world
Right.
and relate to other people?
Big time. And I know, like, you and Logan make fun of me all the time for that because we'll be in a very public place and my head is just on a swivel. I am checking everybody out. I'm walking and I'm just picking gaps and jiving and juking in between people. Like, most people are just, they're blank. There's nothing there. They're just wandering through life blank. And I can't deal with that. I am always kind of checking out situations, and me and my 2 Chainz, we've talked about that too. Like, I don't know. Like, we can't help it now. It's drilled into us that, like, we show up somewhere and I can't help it. I'm scanning a room as soon as I walk in. I can't help but scan it and try to pick out people or exits, or if things go gunny sack, I'm going to have a plan. Yeah. I'm going to have an escape route in a safety zone. I will. So,
and this is not to denigrate anyone or alienate all of the listeners who are not wildland firefighters,
right.
which is pretty much everyone. But I do think it is an interesting thing going from those sort of high intensity jobs and then you're going back to something that's just slowed down. It's just not as intensive in any way. Right.
Yeah, that's difficult. Me and my buddy Hippie have kind of talked about that too. Just recently we were talking about that, and just how, like, you know, it's very rare you get this group of guys who just do something so difficult, and it's like what people would say, like, is the worst work possible. And you just you become so close to it and you love it, and you just, I don't know, it's drilled into you. And he says the same thing. Like, it's kind of weird. It's not that it's like a life is dull or anything like that, but it's a different level, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that kind of takes me back to something you said, you know, much earlier in the podcast. You were talking about the state fires where you're the initial attack people. You're there. And you said, you know, those are the really fun ones.
Correct.
Where I think most people would, even the less intense parts of your job, I don't think a lot of people would go like, oh, this is fun, sleeping in a sleeping in a sack on the ground.
Right.
What about it is fun?
It's organized chaos, but it's what you show up and, like, you're just, your mind, especially like if it's a grass fire. So, like, grass fires are a ton of fun. And you're running. So one guy's like hanging out the window, one guy's driving crazy, and you're spraying it, and like it's you're running hotline essentially. You're just trying to put out this fire, and it's just adrenaline shoots through you for this brief moment in time, an hour or so, depending on how long the fire lasts. And then, like, it's such a strange job, because then you're sitting in your truck, or you're doing push-ups, or you're reading a book, or, like, it's so strange, because it's most of the time it's chill, and then you have to just be ready to go in an instant.
Sure.
And you get there, and like, depending on the job, like, sometimes you spike out on a fire, so you go and you fight this fire initial attack, and you get a line around it, you contain it. It's not controlled though, so you contain this fire. Then you get to sleep next to this fire with all your buddies and wake up in the morning and fight it again. And it's one of the coolest experiences ever. Like, initial attack, it's more chaos, but it's organized chaos, and everybody's on point, and the adrenaline's just up a little more than when you're on a national fire, I would say.
Sure.
It's fun.
So, you know, obviously the adrenaline part of it and those sorts of things. And then you and I have talked about too, you're doing this landscaping job thing right now, which is a good job, you know, those sorts of things.
Right.
But talk to me a little bit about having a sense of purpose with the work that you're doing.
Well, that's the thing too. In wildland fire, especially out west, it's not a career so much. It's a job, and it's a really fun job, and you feel important doing it. Like, it didn't hurt me to say that I worked for the North Dakota Forest Service. Like, I'm proud to work for the North Dakota Forest Service. I had a lot of pride in that. But it's a job that I think everybody, they go through this process where, like, well, I'm getting older. I do want a family. I do want to settle down, have a home. Like, I can't be jumping from apartment to apartment and living on floors, and I can't do that forever. That's what you are, just crashing on floors. And
yeah, this is a guy who didn't own furniture for a considerable amount of time. At one point, everything you owned fit in your Jeep.
Correct, and that's how a lot of us live. If it doesn't fit in our cars, we're tossing it.
Yeah.
So it's a very cool lifestyle, but you get to a point where you're like, well, I need to try to do something. And I know a lot of guys who've done this too. And then like they go work a construction job. Like, well, you know, I met this gal or whatever. We're going to try to settle down, and they do it and they go, oh, this sucks. And I thought I was going to be different for whatever reason. I thought I was like, well, I can't do this North Dakota thing anymore. It's not going anywhere for me. I'm not going to have a career here or like a life here. So we moved somewhere, La Crosse, Wisconsin, somewhere where we thought would be a cool place to be. And I got this landscaping job, and they do trail work and stuff. Like, I'll learn how to build trails, and it's cool. I'm learning things. I've learned some native plants and kind of the importance of rain gardens and food forests for your community. It's like I'm learning some things, but I don't have that pride, that importance anymore.
Yeah.
And that is why I will be a firefighter again. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I'm going to make that happen because, and I don't want to, I don't like national fires.
Yeah.
It's chaos and it's kind of gross. There's 1,000 firefighters eating and sleeping next to you and using the same porta potty. It's kind of gross. Like I really don't enjoy fires out west and stuff, but I have this importance for me. Like I can still do something for my community. I am an EMT and I have experience in fire and all this stuff. And I am not meant to landscape. I have come to realize that I am meant to be in the woods. I am meant to cut down trees and try to help my community in that way. So I need to have importance in my job and feel self-important. And so that's my next step, I guess, is getting back to the fire world, really.
And maybe an important thing to point out too, for anyone who may be listening, like, oh, this sounds like an interesting thing. Not all wildland firefighters do this, but you have your structural firefighting as well.
Right.
That's a different certification. That's a different, training thing. And then I think an important thing for anybody kind of jumping to something new is understanding there's opportunities to stem off from that.
Right.
Where you have the capability to do some forestry things,
right.
Department of Natural Resources things.
Yep.
Like you said, your EMT, that's something that you were able to get training for while you were doing the wildland firefighting thing. Yep. So that's important too, is you can branch off from these different things if you're willing to put in some of that work, get some of those certifications.
Right. And that's something I tell the young guys all the time is, we all started out with no skills at all, essentially. I was a young kid who I ran some machinery and stuff like that at Valero and did some different things, but I didn't really have any skills. And now I literally have a trade that can take me anywhere in the country.
Sure.
I am that good of a sawyer now that I can literally go anywhere and get a job cutting down trees or doing whatever. It's like, just do something. I always tell that chase whimsies. If you got an idea, go chase it and go figure it out. And you're going to suck at it for a while, but go and do it. Because now I've kind of picked where I want to be, and I will get a job that I want to do there. Like even if I, start your own tree trimming business or whatever the case may be, like there's so many options. If you have a tangible skill, people will come to you. Yeah. So.
Well, and that's takes me back to a couple of things. One, just going back to really how the wildland firefighters, a lot of you live. I remember when Amy, your now fiance, was going to move in with you in North Dakota, and you talking to me on the phone, upset that she wanted to bring a couch.
Right.
And I was like, well, as one does, right. While you're fighting fires for months at a time, she may want to sit down.
Right.
But it is a lifestyle of, there's no sense in having all of these attachments, especially large ones, right. When we have to travel light and we have to live other places, right. And do those sorts of things.
And that was my rookie year was a lot of fun, just as a bunch of young guys, and none of us had like any attachments. We were gone my entire rookie year. We were cutting constantly. So you were with these guys all the time, but then we'd only come home for like 2 days here and there. Then we'd go out again. So 4 of us lived in this bad apartment, and we had no TVs, no furniture. None of us even had a bed.
Yeah.
We all called it carpet time. And we would just so we just sit there and try to make each other laugh again, and we just call it carpet time. nothing to do other than listen to 2 Chainz make up a rap and listen to my buddy Chisholm play the guitar, and like that was our life, and it was so cool as a young man. And I'm glad it's over and I got a couch and a bed now, but it was awesome.
Couches and beds are okay.
Right, they are okay, but yeah, no, it's a cool lifestyle. I recommend it to any kid who figuring things out still, because that's what all of us are doing, just figuring it out in the woods.
And I just, again, stemming off a couple of things from that, I think one thing we talked about, having a job where you feel a sense of purpose. That's something I always try and instill in my students as well, where no matter what job you get, not every day is not going to be cupcakes and rainbows, and you're not going to enjoy every minute of it. But if you have a career, if you have a life that feels purposeful, that's the thing that drives you, and at the end of the day you can feel good about it. And so I always try and tell my students to start with that. I mean, start with, what are things that you do that make you feel purposeful? What are things that you feel, I mean, even simple things that you may not think of as significant, like you kind of mentioned, you're not a big crowd of people type of person.
They're the worst.
Yeah. So, I mean, understanding those things about yourself, I think, is really important to be like, okay, I'm not going to be happy crowded into an office. I mean, that would be a death sentence for you.
For sure.
So I tell my students that too, if I didn't have opportunities to be creative and speak to them and do something that I feel is purposeful as an educator and those sorts of things, I think I would be very unhappy with at least my career with that as well. So I think that's an important starting point. And I think it's a great thing to sometimes just jump in and try things and figure out, is this, because sometimes it's hard for people to know what they really want truly, and then you go and do something like this, and it is hey, I really do enjoy being in the woods, and I really do these sorts of things, where for other people that would be a nightmare. Right.
And those like some of the 2 things I live by all the time is like, get out of your head, follow your heart, and chase whimsies, man. If you think something's interesting, kind of go check it out, go do it. And like when I got started, I didn't know I couldn't tell you an oak from a maple. Like literally, like I that bad with trees. Like I don't know, no skills in it. And now I love nothing more than going to the woods and being surrounded by trees. And people get sick of me. I'm like, I quiz my fiance all the time. Hey, what tree is this? What tree is this? And I love that part of life. And I never knew I did, but I chased whimsies. I made a decision to go try something, and it worked out so well. It was an incredible ride. So
yeah, absolutely.
I say that do something that follow your heart, do something that means something to you, and I guess get a skill and enjoy it.
And so we've talked a little bit about, and I don't want this to seem like we're talking entirely in sort of a male focused thing, but this line of work attracts a sort of a type of person cut from a certain type of cloth, I suppose. So, I mean, I guess if you can describe a little bit, I mean, who are the people that are generally gravitating toward this? Not that, of course, there's always, other variations to that, but.
And, there's different crews all have. I can only really speak of my experience with my certain crew. And my certain crew is a kind of a really cool group of guys where, that's the people I'm sort of drawn to. They're people who are kind of searching for something. They're all, most of us were guys who didn't really know what we wanted to do. We all, I feel like all of us were kind of had a little lost moment, or like, well, I don't know, nothing really sounds right to me, and this at least sounds cool. And then we're all from different parts of the country. We all end up in North Dakota. None of us are from North Dakota, know nothing about North Dakota, and we just made the best of it. And they're my favorite people. They're people who just kind of like, question things in life. And that's who I'm going to be drawn to all the time. People who just want to experiment and figure out their journey, their certain path through this world, and meet some cool people. And that was my experience. There's tons of people. You meet firefighters on national fires, and they're just there for a paycheck. And, you meet people, of course, you meet people from all different paths, and some you show up and you're like, well, that's a bad fire crew. You can just tell. And some are really put together and put in the time. And my group, I would say, I mean, we're all guys from kind of similar paths in the sense that didn't know what we wanted to do, maybe somebody got in a little trouble or something like that, and just kind of
Yeah.
feeling our way through the world, and led us to the woods in North Dakota, and we're all better because of it.
And that why becomes such an important thing,
Right.
like why are you doing this becomes the driving force.
Exactly. Yeah. Knowing your why. And, sometimes guys, we do butt heads and things get stressful, but like we're all here trying to accomplish this cool goal. So
Yeah.
Knowing your why is a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, so safe to say that wildland firefighting is a predominantly male profession, but it's something women can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially like my crew just never had females that applied to it. It's a little different state crew. We'd go to that one Itasca Community College, and that's where we get most of our guys. Most of us guys, we all came from the same college. Kind of strange. But, every national crew, hot shot crew, smoke jumpers, there's always women on all these crews.
Yeah.
And it's such a unique group too. Like I fought fires with, Native Americans, clearly on tons of Native American cultures. They have a really strong fire program. Native Alaskans, I fought fire with, so many different hot shots and all this stuff, and convict crews. I've literally fought fire and slept next to convict crews out there trying to do something good in the world after they made a mistake. And it's such a unique experience. I don't know. I'm better because of it. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we're getting kind of close to the end, but do you got like a cool story for us? An exciting fire experience maybe to end with? Like a one situation that was particularly sketchy or something like that?
Sure. We've had a couple watch out moments, I guess. The one that always kind of comes to mind is my buddy Hippie about got killed, and we were in Oregon and we were working a night shift, and the fire was still ripping pretty well, and we were kind of on a side hill. It was like pretty steep drop off if you went back, and we're all kind of mopping up around this tree. Mopping up is basically just mixing hot dirt with cold dirt, essentially. But we have like a flame. We have things that are flaming above us. These all these pieces of like cigars is kind of what you call them. These pieces of broke off trees that are still smoking, and one of them actually broke off. The top broke off and starts coming end over end on fire. This big log, end over end. And I'm actually behind this tree working, and all of a sudden I just hear all my buddies just, watch out, just start screaming. and everybody, and I turn and I look, and my buddy Gibby, he jumps away, and my buddy Hippie is just standing there holding this tool, like getting ready to hop either into fire, off a cliff, or into tools, or just, he's just waiting to make his last move before this log kills him. And it literally stopped like the last turn it could possibly make. If it hit one more turn, it would have came, and it stopped like dead right there. And I was like, wow, like that was a close call. So there's all sorts of moments. Like now that we're cutting down trees and at the Bismarck fire, and my buddy, when homeowners are involved, it gets a little sketchier.
Yeah.
And he was cutting down a tree, and we had to push it through this crazy little window. And widowmakers, they're a really nasty thing in the fire. Widowmakers kill a lot of firefighters, and this widowmaker the top broke off of this tree, and it came and it like totally grazed his hard hat and hit the side of him. He dropped his chainsaw, and he just looked at us and goes, I almost died there. And we're like, you sure did. Pick that chainsaw back up. We got work to do. And then you move on to the next thing, on to the next tree.
And I imagine that's sort of an interesting lesson to take into life too, where it's, if you're on a fire, you don't have time to sit and really contemplate the fact that you almost died. Like, you have to just shake it off and move.
Right.
So I suppose it becomes more difficult in regular life to get worked up about, cell phone reception or something like that.
That's just it. Even just like listening to people complain about something, it's just like, oh, your complaining is not helping the situation. Just move on. Like we got to get past this to accomplish anything we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
So
that is interesting.
Yep.
Well, maybe I just want to take a moment to, I guess we've been talking this whole time about firefighters. So first, a thank you to the work that you do.
Yeah, you bet.
And all of our, people in service professions, the wildland firefighters, structural firefighters, EMTs and first responders, police officers, everyone in the, military armed services.
Right.
Because what all of you guys do allows me to do the things that I do.
Right.
So a thank you to everybody who's listening, who's involved with any of those and those sorts of things. And thanks a lot, man, for coming on and talking about it a little bit. Hey, whatever, man. Love you, man.
You bet. Love you too. I had a lot of fun. This is cool.
All right. Well, that wraps episode 2. Thanks a lot.
You bet.